You signed the prenup, Erin. You leave with what you came with, which is absolutely nothing. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the marble walls of the courtroom hallway, his arm draped around his pregnant mistress. He thought he had won. He thought the quiet woman in the cheap coat trembling before him was defeated. But he didn't check the visitor list. He didn't know that the black SUV pulling up to the curb didn't belong to a taxi service, but to the Sterling Group's biggest rival. Marcus was about to learn that silence isn't weakness, it's just the calm before the storm. The rain in Seattle always felt like a warning, but on that Tuesday night, it felt like a verdict. Erin stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse on the 42nd floor, watching the city lights blur through the downpour. Behind her, the sound of a zipper tearing shut was the only noise in the expansive, sterile living room. "Are you even listening to me?" Marcus's voice was sharp, a serrated knife that had been cutting away at her self-esteem for 3 years. Erin turned slowly. Her husband, Marcus Vance, stood by the door, a leather suitcase at his feet. It wasn't his suitcase. It was hers. The old, battered thing she had brought with her when she moved in 3 years ago. "I heard you, Marcus," she said softly. Her voice was steady, though her hands were trembling inside the pockets of her cardigan. "You want me out. I don't just want you out, Erin. I am putting you out. Tonight." Marcus checked his Rolex, a platinum timepiece she knew cost more than her father's entire pension. "Lydia is moving in tomorrow morning. I don't want her to see your clutter. It's bad for the baby's energy." The mention of the name Lydia sent a cold spike through Erin's chest. Lydia wasn't just a random woman. She was Marcus's personal assistant, a woman Erin had cooked dinner for, a woman Erin had thanked for organizing Marcus's schedule so he could be home for their anniversary, an anniversary he had spent texting Lydia under the dinner table. "She's pregnant," Erin stated, not asking. The rumors had reached her weeks ago, whispered by the doorman and the cleaning staff who looked at Erin with pity. 4 months, Marcus smirked, adjusting his silk tie. "It's a boy, an heir. Something you clearly couldn't provide." That was the lowest blow. Marcus knew about the complications, the quiet visits to Dr. Henderson, the tears shed in the guest bathroom. He knew she wanted a family more than anything. "We have a lease, Marcus. My name is on the building access," Erin tried to reason, though she knew it was futile. Marcus laughed, a dry, humorless bark. He walked over to the coffee table and picked up a thick envelope. He tossed it at her. It hit her chest and fell to the floor. "That is the divorce filing, and a reminder of the prenup you signed. Article 4, Section 2. In the event of infidelity or dissolution initiated by the higher-earning spouse due to irreconcilable incompatibility, the dependent spouse waives all rights to alimony, property, and assets." Erin looked down at the papers. "I never cheated on you." "Doesn't matter," Marcus sneered, stepping closer, looming over her. "I have aggressive lawyers, Erin. Silas Thorne represents me. Do you know his billing rate? It's more than you used to make in a year as a librarian. If you fight me, I will bury you in legal fees until you're begging for a cardboard box to sleep in. Just sign the uncontested papers, take your trash, and leave." He kicked the suitcase toward her. "Now." Erin looked at the man she had married. She remembered the charm he had displayed 3 years ago, the humble architect who loved her quiet intelligence. It had all been a facade. He had married her because she was safe, and nobody from nowhere who wouldn't challenge him while he built his empire. Or so he thought. "You're making a mistake, Marcus," Erin said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The only mistake I made was thinking you could fit into my world," he retorted. "You're dull, Erin. You have no connections, no ambition, and no style. Lydia, she fits the brand. You? You're just a placeholder. The elevator dinged. The private doors slid open, and 2 security guards, men Erin had greeted by name every morning, stepped in. They looked down at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. "Escort Mrs. Vance out," Marcus commanded, turning his back to pour himself a scotch. "And take her keycard." "Mr. Vance, it's pouring outside." One of the guards, a kind man named Jerry, muttered. "Not my problem, Jerry. Do your job, or I'll find someone who will." Erin raised a hand to stop Jerry from grabbing her arm. "It's okay, Jerry. I can walk." She bent down and picked up the envelope and her suitcase. She didn't pack her clothes. She didn't take the jewelry he had bought her for photo ops. She didn't take the iPad or the credit cards. She took only the suitcase she came with. As she reached the elevator, she paused and looked back at Marcus. He was sipping his drink, admiring his reflection in the darkened window. "Marcus," she said. He didn't turn around. "Goodbye, Erin." "I hope you remember this moment," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I hope you remember exactly how it felt to be this powerful." The elevator door slid shut, sealing her out of the life she had tried so hard to build. The descent took 40 seconds. When Erin stepped out of the lobby of the Obsidian Tower, the cold wind slapped her face instantly. The rain was torrential. She had no umbrella. She dragged her suitcase onto the wet pavement of 4th Avenue. She had $63 in her pocket. Her personal bank account had been drained. Marcus had joint access and had likely frozen it, pending litigation, a dirty tactic to ensure she couldn't hire a lawyer. She walked 2 blocks, her sneakers soaking through, until she found the awning of a closed coffee shop. She shivered, pulling her coat tighter. Passers-by ignored her. To them, she was just another tragic figure in the city night. But Erin wasn't crying. She reached into the inner lining of her suitcase, ripping a small seam she had sewn years ago. Her fingers brushed against a cold, hard piece of plastic, a burner phone, and a small notebook with a single number written on the first page. She had promised herself she would never make this call. She had left that world behind 10 years ago to live a normal, humble life, away from the spotlight, away from the pressure, away from him. She wanted to be loved for herself, not for the name she was born with. Marcus had loved Erin the librarian, but he had destroyed her. Now he was going to meet Erin Vanderquilt. She powered on the old phone. It had barely any battery left. Her fingers, numb from the cold, dialed the number. It rang once, twice. "This is a private line," a deep, curt voice answered. "Identify yourself." Erin took a breath, the smell of rain and exhaust filling her lungs. "It's me, Julian," she whispered. There was a silence on the other end so profound it felt like the line had gone dead. Then, the sound of a chair scraping back, movement, urgency. "Elle?" The voice cracked, losing its corporate steeliness. "Erin, is that you? My God, we've been looking. Where are you?" "I'm in Seattle," she said, her voice finally breaking as the adrenaline wore off. I made a mistake, Julian. You were right. You were right about everything. Are you safe?" The voice was demanding now, the tone of a man used to commanding armies, or in this case, a global conglomerate. "No," she admitted, looking at the homeless man eyeing her suitcase a few yards away. "I'm on the street. He kicked me out. He left me with nothing." "Who?" The word was a growl. "My husband, Marcus Vance." "Vance?" Julian repeated the name as if tasting poison. "The architect? The one with the cheap mid-rises in downtown?" "Yes. Stay exactly where you are. Share your location. Do not move." "Julian, I don't want to come back to the family. I need a lawyer. A good one." "You don't need a lawyer, Elle," Julian said, and she could hear the car door slamming in the background on his end, the sound of a private jet engine whining to life nearby. "You need a war counsel, and you're getting one. He says I signed a prenup. He says I get nothing." Julian laughed, a dark, terrifying sound that made Marcus's laugh earlier seem like a child's giggle. "He thinks he's playing checkers, Elle. He has no idea he just flipped the board on a grandmaster. I'm coming to get you, and God have mercy on Mr. Vance, because I certainly won't." Erin hung up. She slid down the brick wall of the coffee shop, sitting on her suitcase. She watched the rain fall, washing away the last 3 years of her life. Marcus Vance had wanted a trophy wife. He had discarded a librarian. But he had just declared war on the sole heiress of the Vanderquilt tech empire, and her brother, the most ruthless CEO on the East Coast, was already in the air. The rain had turned into a relentless sheet of grey by the time the headlights cut through the darkness. It wasn't just one car, it was 3, sleek, black Cadillac Escalades with tinted windows, moving in a tight, predatory formation that forced the few taxis on the road to veer out of the way. They screeched to a halt in front of the coffee shop. The lead car's door flew open before the wheels had even stopped rolling. A man stepped out. He didn't run, despite the downpour. He moved with a terrifying precision. He was tall, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than the coffee shop's annual revenue. He ignored the puddles ruining his Italian leather shoes. "Erin!" Erin stood up, her legs shaking. "Julian." Julian Vanderquilt, the CEO of Vanderquilt Industries, and a man Forbes had nicknamed the Iceman, closed the distance in 3 strides. He didn't look like a CEO in that moment. He looked like a brother who wanted to burn the world down. He pulled her into a crushing hug, burying his face in her wet, matted hair. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice trembling with a rare display of emotion. "I've got you, Elle. You're safe." He pulled back, gripping her shoulders, his eyes scanning her face. He saw the red rimming her eyes, the hollowness of her cheeks, the cheap, soaked coat. His jaw tightened so hard, a muscle feathered beneath his ear. "Did he hit you?" Julian asked, his voice dangerously low. "No," Erin said, wiping rain from her face. He broke me, Julian. He threw me out like I was garbage." Julian turned to the large men who had stepped out of the escort vehicles, his personal security detail. "Get her suitcase. Put her in the middle car with me. Call the pilot and tell him we're not leaving tonight. Book the penthouse floor at the Fairmont Olympic. And get Dr. Orris on the phone. I want her checked out." "Yes, Mr. Vanderquilt." The head of security nodded, grabbing Erin's battered suitcase with more respect than Marcus had ever shown her. Inside the warmth of the SUV, surrounded by heated leather seats and the soft hum of the engine, Erin finally broke down. She cried for the 3 years of lies. She cried for the baby she couldn't carry and the husband who blamed her for it. She cried for the fool she had been, thinking she could escape her family's shadow and find someone who loved her, not her money. Julian sat beside her, holding her hand silently, letting her weep. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply handed her a silk handkerchief and waited. When the tears finally subsided, the car was moving smoothly through the Seattle streets. "I told you," Erin whispered, looking out the window. 10 years ago. I told you I wanted to be normal. I changed my name to Erin Vance. Well, Erin Hart before that. I wanted a life where people didn't look at me and see dollar signs. And I respected that, Julian said softly. I kept the family away. I let you live in that apartment. I let you work at the library. I even had our security team pull back so you wouldn't feel watched. He paused, his grip on her hand tightening. But I never stopped checking the background reports. I knew about the Mistress L. Erin whipped her head around. You knew. For 2 months. I have a file on Lydia Cross that is 3 inches thick. I was waiting for you to see it. I couldn't interfere without breaking our agreement. But when my security alert triggered that your phone was reactivated, I knew it was over. He reached into the pocket of the seat in front of him and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen and handed it to her. It was a live feed of the stock market, focused on a specific sector, real estate and construction. Marcus thinks he's a big fish in Seattle, Julian said, his voice returning to that cold, corporate steel. He just landed the contract for the new city stadium, right? That's what gave him the confidence to dump you today. He thinks he's untouchable now. Erin nodded. He said it was his golden ticket. It's not a ticket. It's a noose, Julian corrected. He leveraged everything to get that contract. His liquidity is non-existent. He's floating on loans, mostly from Seattle First Bank. Erin looked at him, confusion clouding her tired eyes. How do you know all this? Julian offered a thin, cruel smile. Because, little sister, Vanderquilt Industries acquired Seattle First Bank this afternoon. The paperwork went through 10 minutes before I picked you up. Erin gasped. You bought his bank? I bought his debt, Julian corrected. I own his mortgage. I own his business loans. I own the credit cards he uses to buy that mistress her jewelry. Technically, as of this evening, I own him. The car pulled up to the hotel. Doorman rushed to open the doors. So, Julian said, helping her out. We have 2 options. Option A, I foreclose on him tomorrow, ruin his credit, and leave him destitute by lunch. It's fast. It's efficient. Erin stood on the pavement, the rain no longer touching her under the umbrella held by a guard. She thought about Marcus's laugh. She thought about the way he looked at his watch while he kicked her out. She thought about Lydia moving into her home, touching her things. No, Erin said, her voice hardening. That's too easy. He needs to feel it. He needs to stand in a court of law and think he's winning, just so we can watch the hope leave his eyes. Julian grinned, and for the first time he looked truly happy. Option B it is. The slow burn, let's get you a hot shower and a meal. Tomorrow, we go shopping. If you're going to war, Erin, you need to look like a Vanderquilt. 3 days later, Marcus Vance stood in the center of his living room, a glass of champagne in hand. The rain had stopped, and the Seattle skyline was gleaming. Babe, do you think this grey sofa works? Lydia called out. She was already redecorating. Erin's cozy vintage armchairs were gone, replaced by sharp, modern Italian furniture that looked uncomfortable but expensive. Whatever you want, Lyd, Marcus said, walking over to kiss her forehead. You're the lady of the house now. I just don't want any of her bad vibes left, Lydia pouted, rubbing her slight baby bump. Did she sign the papers yet? She will, Marcus scoffed. She has no money, no family, and nowhere to go. She's probably sleeping in a shelter. She'll sign just to get the $5,000 relocation assistance I generously offered. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Vance, the concierge's voice came through. You have been served. Marcus frowned. Send it up. A few minutes later, a process server handed him a thick stack of documents. Marcus ripped them open, expecting the signed, uncontested divorce papers. Instead, he saw bold, black letters at the top. Notice of contested divorce and countersuit for damages. He scanned the document, his face turning red. She's contesting? On what grounds? Emotional distress? Fraud. He laughed, throwing the papers onto the new glass table. She's delusional. She hired some strip mall lawyer to scare me. He picked up his phone and dialed Silas Thorne. Silas, My ex is trying to fight back. I saw the filing electronically, Marcus. Silas's voice was smooth, bored. It's adorable. They filed in King County Superior Court. Hearing is set for Friday. Emergency motion for spousal support. Spousal support? Marcus roared. The prenup waives that. Exactly. We'll walk into court, waive the prenup, and the judge will toss her case out in 10 minutes. It'll cost you an hour of my time, but it'll be fun to watch her squirm. Do you want to settle? Hell no, Marcus spat. I want to crush her. I want her to stand there and listen while the judge tells her she's worthless. Friday at 9 a.m. then. Wear the navy suit. It projects authority. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, looking immaculate in his navy suit. Lydia sat in the gallery behind him, wearing a white dress that emphasized her pregnancy, playing the role of the supportive future wife. Silas Thorne sat next to Marcus, checking his emails on a gold-plated iPad. Relax, Marcus. This is routine. I just want it over with, Marcus muttered, tapping his foot. At 8:55 a.m., the heavy oak doors opened. Marcus turned, expecting to see Erin in her dowdy grey cardigan, looking terrified. A woman walked in. It was Erin, but it wasn't the Erin he knew. She was wearing a cream-coloured power suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. It was sleek, sophisticated, and screamed money. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was blown out in soft, glossy waves. She wore oversized sunglasses, which she removed slowly, revealing eyes that were clear and focused. But it was the shoes that caught Lydia's eye from the back row. Red-bottomed Louboutins, the kind Lydia had been begging Marcus to buy her for months. Who paid for that? Marcus whispered to Silas, frowning. She didn't have a dime 3 days ago. Credit cards, probably, Silas dismissed. Debt looks bad in a divorce hearing. We'll use it. Erin walked to the plaintiff's table and sat down alone. She placed a single, thin file folder on the table. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't look at Lydia. She looked straight at the judge's empty bench. Where is her lawyer? Marcus sneered. Did he bail on her? She's representing herself, Silas chuckled. Pro se. Oh, this is going to be a slaughter. The judge hates self-represented litigants. They waste time. All rise, the bailiff announced, the Honourable Judge Kincaid presiding. Judge Kincaid, a stern woman with a reputation for zero tolerance for nonsense, took the bench. She shuffled her papers. Case number 49-2001, Vance v. Vance. Parties present? Silas Thorne for the respondent. Marcus Vance. Silas stood up, buttoning his jacket, projecting confident charm. Ready to proceed, Your Honour. We have a motion to dismiss based on a prenuptial agreement. And for the plaintiff? The judge looked at Erin. Mrs. Vance, are you representing yourself? Erin stood up. Her voice was steady, projecting to the back of the room. No, Your Honour. My counsel is just arriving. He had to clear security. Court starts at 9 o'clock, Mrs. Vance, the judge snapped. If he is not here in... Bang! The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with force. The room went silent. Walking down the centre aisle was a phalanx of 5 lawyers in matching black suits. They moved in perfect synchronization, carrying briefcases that looked like weapon cases. Leading them was a man who sucked the oxygen out of the room. He was tall, imposing, with a jawline that could cut glass. He wore a 3-piece suit that made Silas Thorne's expensive outfit look like it came from a discount rack. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He recognized that face. Everyone in business recognized that face. It was on the cover of Fortune magazine last month. It was Julian Vanderquilt, the billionaire CEO of the Vanderquilt conglomerate, one of the most powerful men in America. Marcus's brain short-circuited. Why is Julian Vanderquilt here? Did he buy the courthouse? Julian didn't stop at the gallery. He walked straight through the swinging gate, past Marcus, ignoring him as if he were a piece of furniture, and stood next to Erin. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of absolute protection and dominance. "Julian Vanderquilt," he announced, his voice deep and resonant, filling the courtroom without a microphone. "Representing the plaintiff, Erin Vanderquilt." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. The stenographer stopped typing. Even Judge Kincaid looked over her glasses, her eyebrows rising. "Vanderquilt?" Marcus whispered, his face draining of color. He looked at Silas. Why did he call her Vanderquilt? Silas Thorne was no longer checking his email. He was staring at Julian with the look of a man who realizes he brought a knife to a nuclear war. His hands were actually shaking. "Your Honor," Silas stammered, standing up, his smooth charm evaporating. I wasn't aware Mr. Vanderquilt was a licensed attorney in this state." "I am licensed in New York, London, and Washington State," Julian said coolly, not even looking at Silas. He pulled a document from his briefcase and slid it toward the judge. "My credentials, Your Honor, and my notice of appearance." Julian turned slowly to face Marcus. His eyes were cold, dead, and terrifying. "And just for the record," Julian added, addressing the room but locking eyes with Marcus, "the plaintiff's name is not Vance. She has reverted to her maiden name. I believe the respondent knows it. Or perhaps—" Julian smiled, a shark baring its teeth. He never bothered to ask who his wife really was. Marcus slumped back in his chair. He looked at Erin. Really looked at her. And for the first time, he saw the resemblance. The same nose, the same sharp chin. He hadn't married a nobody. He had married the heiress to an empire he could only dream of touching, and he had just told her to leave with nothing. "Ready to proceed, Your Honor," Julian said. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals or the moment a verdict is read. Silas Thorne, a man who charged $800 an hour and prided himself on never being surprised, was staring at his iPad as if it had just bitten him. He frantically tapped the screen, searching for Erin Vanderquilt. When the search results loaded, his face went from pale to ghostly white. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Kincaid prompted, her patience thinning, "are you ready to address the motion to dismiss?" Silas swallowed hard, loosening his tie. "Yes, Your Honor. We assert that the prenuptial agreement signed by Ms. Vanderquilt, waives all claims to marital assets. It is a standard, ironclad document." Marcus leaned over, whispering angrily. "Why do you look scared? It's just a name. She's still the same broke librarian." Julian Vanderquilt didn't even sit down. He stood at the podium, his posture relaxed, like a predator watching wounded prey stumble. "Your Honor," Julian began, his voice smooth as velvet but sharp as a razor. "Mr. Thorne describes the prenup as standard. It is anything but. It is a draconian document designed to exploit a spouse with less perceived power. However, we are not here to argue the fairness of the prenup." Marcus smirked. Good, he thought. He knows he can't beat the contract. "We are here," Julian continued, "to enforce it." Marcus's eyebrows furrowed. "Enforce it?" Julian opened a leather binder. Article 6, Section B of the agreement states, "In the event of a divorce, both parties retain sole ownership of assets acquired prior to the marriage and any inheritance received during the marriage." "Is that correct, Mr. Thorne?" "Yes," Silas said, confused. "That protects Marcus's company." "Does it?" Julian smiled. "Because it also protects Erin's assets. And since my client is the beneficiary of the Vanderquilt Trust, established when she was 18, her personal assets at the time of signing this prenup were approximately... Let's see. Julian pulled out a sheet of paper and pretended to squint at it. $450 million. The courtroom gasped. A reporter in the back row started typing furiously on his phone. Marcus felt the blood leave his head. He gripped the table. "That's a lie," he hissed. "She worked at a library. She wore thrift store clothes." "She lives modestly," Julian said, not looking at Marcus. "Some people don't need to scream about their wealth to know they have it. Unlike others." Julian turned a page. "Now, here is where it gets interesting for Mr. Vance. The prenup also contains a full disclosure of financial status clause. Both parties swore they disclosed all assets and debts at the time of signing. If one party lied, the agreement is voidable at the injured party's discretion." "I disclosed everything," Marcus shouted, standing up. "Sit down, Mr. Vance," Judge Kincaid barked. "Did you?" Julian asked calmly. He signaled to one of his associate attorneys, who handed a thick stack of documents to the bailiff to give to the judge and the defense. "3 years ago, Mr. Vance, you claimed your company, Vance Architecture, was solvent. You claimed ownership of the Obsidian Tower penthouse. But these bank records, subpoenaed this morning, show that the penthouse was actually held by a shell company in the Caymans, which was technically insolvent at the time due to a failed hotel project in Miami, a project you conveniently left off your disclosure forms." Silas Thorne was flipping through the documents, sweating. "Objection. Relevance?" "The relevance," Julian said, his voice hardening, "is that Mr. Vance committed fraud to get my client to sign that prenup. He needed her to believe he was stable. He wasn't. He was drowning in debt even then." "But here is the twist, Your Honor." Julian leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Marcus. "Since Mr. Vance committed fraud, we could void the prenup. But we won't. We choose to enforce the penalty clause. Article 9. If one party is found to have hidden debts exceeding $100,000, they forfeit 50% of their marital appreciation to the other spouse as a penalty." Julian paused for effect. Mr. Vance's company has grown in value over the last 3 years, mostly due to the City Stadium contract he just won. A contract he won using designs that, we will prove, were heavily influenced by my client's uncredited input. "She's a librarian," Marcus screamed, losing control. "She knows nothing about architecture." Erin stood up then. She didn't need Julian's help for this. She looked Marcus dead in the eye. "Who fixed the load-bearing calculations on the West Wing draft, Marcus?" she asked softly. "Who suggested using cross-laminated timber to lower the carbon footprint, which is the only reason the City Council approved your bid? You were drunk on scotch that night. I sat at your computer and fixed your mess." Marcus's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He remembered. He remembered waking up and finding the work done, assuming he had done it in a blackout. He had never asked. He had just taken the credit. "We are freezing Mr. Vance's assets pending an audit of his true financial state," Julian concluded. "And we are suing for 50% of Vance Architecture, plus legal fees. And since my hourly rate is significantly higher than Mr. Thorne's, that's going to be an expensive bill." Judge Kincaid looked at the evidence. She looked at Marcus, who was now trembling. "Motion to dismiss denied," the judge ruled, slamming her gavel. "Temporary restraining order on all Vance Architecture assets granted. Mr. Vance, you are to provide full access to your books to Mr. Vanderquilt's forensic accountants by 5 p.m. today." 5 p.m., Silas squeaked. "Your Honor, that's in 6 hours." "Then you better start making copies," the judge said dryly. Court adjourned. The walk out of the courthouse was a gauntlet. The press had already gotten wind of the name Vanderquilt. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. "Erin, is it true you're the Vanderquilt heiress? Marcus, did you know your wife was a billionaire? Mr. Vanderquilt, are you buying the Seahawks?" Julian's security team parted the sea of reporters like a bulldozer. Marcus, on the other hand, was swarmed. He pushed through the microphones, his face a mask of panic, Lydia trailing behind him, looking like she was about to be sick. "Marcus, what does this mean?" Lydia hissed as they scrambled into his Mercedes. "Does she really get half the company?" "Shut up, Lydia." Marcus slammed the steering wheel. "She gets nothing. It's a trick. It's all smoke and mirrors. I'm the architect. I'm the talent. They can't touch me." But his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get the key into the ignition. He drove like a maniac back to the Vance architecture offices on 5th Avenue. He needed to shred documents. He needed to hide the emails about the Miami failure. He needed to move the cash from the offshore accounts before the freeze took effect. He burst into the lobby of his firm, expecting the usual hum of activity. The receptionists greeting him, the interns running with coffee. Instead, the lobby was dead silent. Standing in the center of the room were 4 people in dark suits wearing ID badges. They were boxing up files. "What is this?" Marcus roared, storming past the receptionist. "Who are you people?" A woman with short, grey hair stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, I'm Agent Miller from the Forensic Audit Division. We're here on behalf of the court-appointed receiver." "Receiver? I own this building." "Not anymore, sir," Agent Miller said calmly. "The bank has called in your loans, specifically the commercial mortgage on this property and the line of credit you used for payroll. The bank can't do that without 30 days' notice. They can if there is a material adverse change in the borrower's financial status," the agent replied. "The freezing order issued by Judge Kincaid an hour ago constitutes a material change. Seattle First Bank is exercising its right to immediate repayment." Marcus froze. Seattle First Bank, Julian's voice echoed in his memory. Vanderquilt Industries acquired Seattle First Bank this afternoon. He had walked right into the trap. Julian hadn't just sued him. He had bought the ground Marcus stood on and was now pulling it out from under him. "Marcus?" He turned to see his CFO, David, walking out of his office with a box of personal items. David looked pale. "David, tell them. Tell them we have the cash reserves." "We don't, Marcus," David said, avoiding his eyes. "You spent the reserves on the new penthouse renovations and the engagement ring for Ms. Cross." Lydia, who had just walked in, froze. Everyone looked at the massive diamond on her finger. Suddenly, it didn't look like a symbol of love. It looked like stolen evidence. "I'm resigning, Marcus," David said quietly. "I can't be part of a fraud investigation. I have a family." "You coward!" Marcus screamed. "I made you." "You used us," David corrected. He walked out the door. Marcus ran to his office, but the door was locked. A security guard, one of the new ones Julian had likely sent, blocked his path. "Access denied, Mr. Vance. This is my office." "Not until the audit is complete, sir. Please escort yourself out, or we will have to assist you." Marcus backed away, his chest heaving. He looked around the open-plan office. His employees, architects, designers, engineers were watching him. There was no loyalty in their eyes, only embarrassment. They knew. They had seen the news. They knew their boss had kicked out his wife, only to find out she could buy and sell him 10 times over. He turned to Lydia. She was standing by the elevator, texting furiously. "Lydia, come on. We'll go to the lake house. We'll figure this out." Lydia looked up. Her expression had changed. The doe-eyed adoration was gone, replaced by a cold calculation that mirrored Marcus's own. "The lake house?" she asked. "The one you said was in your name? Or is that owned by a shell company too?" It's complicated, but we're together, right? We're having a son." Lydia looked down at her stomach, then back at him. "I need security, Marcus. You promised me a life of luxury. You promised me no drama. This," she gestured to the FBI agents and the boxes, "this is not luxury. This is a felony." "I am the victim here," Marcus pleaded. "She lied to me. She pretended to be poor." "And you pretended to be rich," Lydia said coldly. The elevator dinged. "I'm going to my sister's. Don't call me until you fix this." "Lydia, you're carrying my heir." "Right now," she stepped into the elevator. "I'm carrying a liability." The doors closed. Marcus stood alone in the lobby of the empire he had built on lies. The phone at the reception desk started ringing. It was a reporter. Then another line rang. Then another. He turned to the exit, stumbling out into the street. He reached for his phone to call Silas, but his screen flashed with a notification. New email, Vanderquilt Industries. Subject, settlement offer. His hands trembling, Marcus opened it. "Mr. Vance, we are willing to drop the fraud charges and the pursuit of your personal bankruptcy under the following conditions. 1. You sign the uncontested divorce papers immediately. 2. You publicly admit that the design for the city stadium was primarily the work of Erin Vanderquilt. 3. You resign as CEO of Vance Architecture and transfer your controlling interest to Erin Vanderquilt for the sum of 1 wars. You have 1 hour. Julian Vanderquilt, Marcus, stared at the screen. $1. They wanted to buy his life's work for $1. He looked up at the sky. It was raining again. Marcus sat in the conference room of what was formerly his law firm. Silas Thorne had recused himself an hour ago, citing a conflict of interest the moment the malpractice threats from Julian's team started rolling in. Marcus was alone. The hour deadline was up. The door opened. This time it wasn't a team of lawyers. It was just Erin and Julian. Erin walked to the head of the table. She placed a single, crisp document on the mahogany surface. Beside it, she placed a pen. Marcus looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie loosened, his expensive suit rumpled. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Erin," he croaked, "we can work this out. Please, you loved me once." Erin looked at him, her expression unreadable. It wasn't hate, it wasn't anger, it was pity, and that hurt Marcus more than any scream could have. "I loved the man I thought you were, Marcus," she said softly. "I loved the man who told me he wanted to build things that lasted. But you don't build, you just take." "I was under pressure," Marcus pleaded, standing up, his hands shaking. "The market was crashing. I needed the stadium deal to save us. I did it for us." "Don't," Julian cut in, his voice like a whip crack. He remained standing by the door, a silent sentinel. "Do not insult her intelligence. You did it for your ego. You did it so you could buy a bigger boat and replace your wife with a younger model." Marcus slumped back down. "If I sign this, I have nothing. My reputation will be destroyed. I'll never work in this city again." "Your reputation is already destroyed," Erin said. "The news cycle moves fast, Marcus. Twitter is already trending with Zafredica Vance fraud. The American Institute of Architects has suspended your license pending an investigation. It's over." She tapped the paper. "This is a mercy, Marcus. You sign this, and Julian calls off the forensic team. You avoid jail time for bank fraud. You walk away free. Broke, but free." Marcus looked at the document. Transfer of ownership. Consideration. $1. "And Lydia?" Marcus whispered. Lydia called my office 20 minutes ago, Julian said, checking his watch. She's cutting a deal. She's trading information on your offshore accounts in exchange for immunity. She's not coming back, Marcus. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Marcus Vance, the man who wanted to be a king, picked up the pen. His hand trembled so violently the ink blotched on the page. He signed. He pushed the paper toward Erin. Erin reached into her pocket. She pulled out a single, crumpled dollar bill. It was old, soft with wear. Here, she said, sliding it across the table. Marcus stared at the dollar bill. George Washington stared back. Take it, Erin commanded. Marcus reached out and took the bill. It felt like burning paper in his hand. Get out, Julian said. Marcus stood up. He walked to the door, his footsteps heavy. He paused, his hand on the handle, looking back at the woman he had underestimated. What are you going to do with the company? He asked, his voice hollow. You're a librarian. You don't know how to run a firm. Erin smiled, a genuine bright smile that he hadn't seen in years. I'm not going to run it, Marcus. I'm going to dismantle it. And then, I'm going to build something real. Marcus walked out into the hallway. The elevator was waiting. He stepped in, the doors closed, and he descended into obscurity. The alarm clock on the floor buzzed at 5:30 a.m., a harsh, metallic rattle that vibrated against the thin linoleum. Marcus Vance rolled off the mattress, his back seizing up in protest. There was no frame, just a box spring on the floor of a studio apartment in Renton, miles away from the gleaming spires of downtown Seattle. The air in the room smelled of stale instant coffee and the damp, musty scent of the Pacific Northwest that seemed to seep through the single-pane window. Marcus rubbed his face, feeling the stubble. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. Razor blades were expensive, and on a framer's wage, you learned to stretch everything. He dressed in the dark, heavy Carhartt pants that were stiff with drywall dust, a flannel shirt that had seen better days, and steel-toed boots that pinched his toes. He didn't put on an Italian suit. He didn't strap on a Rolex. He checked his pockets, keys, a transit pass, and a crumpled, soft dollar bill that he kept folded in the deepest corner of his wallet. He drank his coffee black, standing over the sink, staring at his reflection in the rusted mirror. The arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by a permanent, haunted exhaustion. Today was Tuesday. But it wasn't just any Tuesday. Marcus took 2 buses to get into the city. He sat in the back, his hat pulled low, avoiding eye contact with the commuters glued to their phones. He used to be the man in the back of the black town car, reading emails on a tablet, annoyed by the traffic. Now he was the traffic. He got off at 4th and Pike and walked 6 blocks. He shouldn't have come. He knew it was masochism, pure and simple. But he couldn't stay away. The construction site that had been the center of his ruin was finished. 6 months ago, this block was supposed to be the Vance Millennium Tower, a monument to his ego, a glass needle piercing the sky. He had leveraged his marriage, his ethics, and his soul to build it. Now, as he stood across the street, huddled in his coat against the biting autumn wind, he saw what it had become. The structure was lower, warmer. The sharp, aggressive angles of his original design had been softened. The facade wasn't cold steel. It was a blend of reclaimed wood and living green walls that seemed to breathe with the city. A massive banner fluttered between 2 oak trees. Grand opening, the Erin Vance Community Center and Public Library. She had kept his name. Not out of respect, he realized with a sinking feeling, but as a reminder. She had turned his name, a brand he had tried to associate with luxury and exclusivity, into a symbol of charity and public service. She had redefined him without his permission. A crowd was gathering, not just the wealthy elites he used to court, but real people. Students with heavy backpacks, elderly couples holding hands, young mothers pushing strollers. There was a buzz of genuine excitement that Marcus had never been able to manufacture with all his PR firms. And then he saw her. Erin walked out onto the raised plaza. Marcus stopped breathing for a moment. She looked different. Not just expensive, though the cream cashmere coat she wore was clearly high-end, but free. The tension that used to live in her shoulders when she was married to him was gone. Her hair was loose, catching the wind. She was laughing at something a man next to her had said. Marcus squinted. The man was tall, wearing a tweed jacket and glasses. He wasn't a shark like Julian. He looked like a professor or a writer. He had a kind face. He placed a hand on the small of Erin's back, a gesture so casual and intimate that it felt like a physical blow to Marcus. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the speakers. It was the mayor. "Welcome to a new chapter for Seattle." Marcus watched the ceremony unfold like a ghost haunting his own funeral. He listened as the mayor praised the vision of a woman who understood that shelter isn't just about walls, but about community. Then Erin took the microphone. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was clear, amplified across the plaza, bouncing off the glass buildings surrounding them. "A year ago, I was told that I didn't fit into this city's future. I was told that worth is measured by what you can take." She paused, and her eyes seemed to scan the crowd. For a terrifying second, Marcus thought she saw him. He shrank back behind a street lamp. "But I learned that worth is measured by what you can give," Erin continued, her hand resting subconsciously on her stomach. She was showing. Just a little. A small bump under the cashmere. Marcus gripped the cold metal of the lamppost. A baby. Lydia had terminated her pregnancy a week after the scandal broke, unwilling to be tied to a broke pariah. She had moved to LA to find a producer. But Erin was building a family. "This building," Erin said, gesturing to the center behind her, "was built on the ruins of a mistake. We tore down the ego to build a foundation for everyone. This library is for the student who needs a quiet place to dream. This legal aid clinic is for the partner who needs a way out of a bad situation. This is for you." The applause was deafening. It wasn't polite clapping. It was a roar of approval. Marcus felt a tear slide down his cheek. It was cold and angry. He wiped it away furiously. He had built skyscrapers. He had won awards. But no one had ever looked at him the way that crowd looked at her. "She's amazing, isn't she?" Marcus jumped. A woman standing next to him, holding a bag of groceries, was smiling at the stage. I used to know her," Marcus muttered, his voice raspy. "You're lucky," the woman said. "She saved this neighborhood. That developer, Vance? The one who tried to bulldoze the community garden? I heard he's in jail or something. Good riddance." Marcus pulled his collar up. "Yeah, good riddance." On the stage, the ribbon cutting began. Julian Vanderquilt stepped forward. He looked as formidable as ever, but there was a softness in his eyes as he looked at his sister. He handed her the scissors. Erin cut the ribbon. The band struck up a jazz tune. Confetti, biodegradable, made from recycled leaves, rained down. Marcus turned away. He couldn't watch the joy anymore. It was too bright, and he was too dark. He walked down the street, his boots heavy on the pavement. He passed a high-end furniture store, the kind he used to shop in with Lydia. He saw his reflection in the window. A tired, middle-aged laborer with nothing to his name but a bad back and a story no one would believe. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the dollar bill. He smoothed it out against the glass of the shop window. Transfer of ownership. Consideration 1 to'ozuzos. It wasn't just the price of his company. It was the price of his arrogance. It was the value Erin had placed on his threats, his power, and his bullying. He realized then that he hadn't just lost his money. He had been erased. Erin hadn't destroyed him out of spite. She had simply outgrown him. She had turned his malice into mulch and grown a garden over it. Spare change? A homeless man sat on a crate near the corner, shaking a paper cup. Marcus looked at the man. He looked at the dollar bill in his hand. It was his last dollar, until payday on Friday. He needed it for a sandwich, but the weight of it in his pocket felt like lead. It was a cursed object, a token of his failure. Here, Marcus said. He dropped the dollar into the cup. Bless you, sir, the man said. Don't, Marcus replied grimly. It's not worth anything. He walked toward the bus stop, blending into the grey wash of the city, disappearing into the background of the world he once thought he owned. Back on the plaza, the crowd was dispersing, filtering into the warm, well-lit lobby of the new centre. Julian walked up to Erin, handing her a bottle of water. You okay? He asked quietly, his eyes scanning the perimeter. Security said they spotted a male matching his description on the southeast corner, 4th and Pike. Erin took a sip of water. She looked toward the corner where the bus stop was. She saw the empty street. I know, she said. I felt him. Do you want me to have him removed? I can have a restraining order filed by lunch. Erin shook her head, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. She turned to look at Liam, who was currently showing a group of children the entrance to the children's reading room. No, Julian, she said. Let him watch. Let him see what real power looks like. Besides, she placed a hand on her brother's arm. He's in a prison of his own making. The walls are made of regret, and there's no parole for that. Julian nodded slowly. You're too good for him. You always were, even when you were hiding in that library. I wasn't hiding, Erin corrected him, linking her arm through his. I was reading, and I learned that every villain is just a hero who forgot how to love. Well, Julian smirked, buttoning his suit jacket. This villain is hungry, and since you're the philanthropist of the year, you're buying lunch. Erin laughed, a sound that rang clear and true, unburdened by the past. Deal. But we're going to that taco truck on 3rd. I'm craving spicy. Tacos? The billionaire CEO raised an eyebrow. I was thinking, Le Pagne. Tacos, Julian. It's a democracy now. They walked down the steps of the community centre together. The brother who had brought the thunder and the sister who had brought the rain, leaving the glass castle shattered behind them to build something that would finally, actually last. Erin's journey from a silenced wife to a powerhouse of justice serves as a brutal reminder. Never mistake silence for submission. Marcus Vance thought he held all the cards because he had the loud voice and the flashy job. He failed to realize that true power doesn't need to shout. It waits. In the end, the glass castle Marcus built shattered because it had no foundation of truth. He lost not because Erin had a wealthy brother, but because he underestimated the character of the woman he slept beside every night. He chased the appearance of success and lost the reality of love. Erin didn't just take his money, she took his narrative. She turned a symbol of corporate greed into a sanctuary for the community, proving that the best revenge isn't just destroying your enemy, it's succeeding in a way they never could. She walked away with everything, not because she was a Vanderquilt, but because she was, finally, herself. If you cheered when Julian walked into that courtroom, or if you felt the power when Erin handed Marcus that $1 bill, hit that like button right now. It helps us share more stories of justice and triumph. What would you have done if you were Erin? Would you have taken the company, or would you have sent Marcus to jail? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next part of our Betrayal and Revenge saga. Until next time, remember, the truth always wins.